Good morning, everybody. I am Kristen Craig, President of the Terre Haute Chamber of Commerce, and would like to welcome you all to our State of Higher Education Forum. We're excited about today's event. Despite the fact that we can't be in a room together, it will be nice for everybody to be able to get together virtually and be able to hear an update from our four local institutions of higher education, since they are such a critical part of our local economy. So thank you all for joining us today. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. First and foremost, I want to thank our sponsor for today's event. Indiana American Water has stepped up to provide the sponsorship today, and we appreciate their support. I would also mention that we are recording today's event, and we'll be posting it on the Chamber's YouTube channel later today. So if anyone you know would like to hear what was said, they can go back and review it that way. That's accessible via our website. I would encourage you all to keep yourself muted, and I'll be honest, if you don't have yourself muted, Jesse, our mute master, will probably take care of that for you. But it does help eliminate the background noise so we can hear our presenters clearly today. And then the last thing I would ask is that you submit your questions via chat. That's usually the best way to facilitate this kind of conversation. We'll be keeping an eye on it, and just feel free to submit those, and I will save a few minutes at the end. We should be wrapping up a little bit after 9 a.m., so everybody can stay on schedule today. So with that, I'd like to introduce Sarah Smith, who is our 2020 Chair of the Chamber Board. She also is with Sycamore Engineering, but I know your chamber spot takes high priority in your life.
This morning it does.
So we're very happy to have Sarah here today, and she's going to welcome our speakers. Sarah?
Thank you, Kristen. No, I do appreciate the opportunity to have a chance to speak, because this year has been unlike any other. We don't get a chance to actually have a face-to-face conversation with people, and so it's been a real pleasure and an honor to be a part of it. I would like to introduce to you all Mr. Josh Garrison from the Indiana Commission on Higher Education. Josh is responsible for the Commission's legislative agenda and focusing on improving Indiana's state financial aid programs, increasing opportunities for returning adults, and implementing the Next Generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship. Prior to joining the Commission, he held positions with Iowa State University and the Michigan Department of Human Services. Mr. Garrison holds a BS in politics and government from Illinois State University and a JD from the Southern Illinois University School of Law. He resides in Fishers with his wife, Angela, and their 2 children. So hopefully you are not having to homeschool those children yet this morning, Josh, and thank you for joining us and taking the time.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on Friday the 13th. Hopefully this goes smoothly today. I'm going to try to share my screen, but we'll find out. I appreciate being the opening act for President Coons, President King, President Curtis, and Chancellor Crooks here. Let me go ahead and see if I can share this. We are a Microsoft Teams office, so learning to use Zoom is a little bit different here. And I think it should be up. If someone could nod or thumbs up so I could tell.
Yep.
All right. Well, again, thank you for the time today to talk with you all. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about higher education here in the state of Indiana. Again, my name is Josh Garrison. I'm the Associate Commissioner for Legislation and Program Implementation here at the Commission for Higher Education. Commissioner Lubbers sends her regrets that she couldn't join you this morning as she had a prior engagement. And today I just want to talk about the role of the Commission and what we do here with higher education, our goals across the state, some of the impacts of COVID-19 on higher education here in Indiana, and then briefly about our state financial aid program. If you've heard anything from the Commission for Higher Education, you've probably heard about our big goal. Our big goal is that 60% of Hoosiers have some sort of education beyond high school. We currently sit at 48.5% with a credential after high school. And we didn't just come up with this number out of the blue. This is what economists say we are going to need to meet the demands of the workforce here in the state of Indiana here by 2025. We've had significant growth over the last decade, but we still have quite a ways to go. A significant portion of that growth has been our ability to better calculate what percent of those short-term certificates? And when we talk about education beyond high school, coming from the Commission for Higher Education, a lot of individuals think I just mean bachelor's degrees and graduate degrees and things like that. And those are extremely important. You're never going to hear me say a bad word about those. But they also include things like apprenticeships, short-term certificates, any of those options that help people have a good career and a good paying job. So just some information about where we're at as a state with our big goal and some of the attainment. You know that, as I mentioned, 48.5% of Hoosiers have some sort of educational attainment beyond high school, and we rank 35th in the nation. We've actually moved up a little bit over the course of the past decade. If we're going to meet this goal, we have to, as a state, do a better job of serving some of our what are really called non-traditional populations, our adult learners. We've had initiatives to encourage more students to come back who have stopped out to earn some sort of degree or credential. And we have to do a better job with students of color, low-income students, and our rural students. We're seeing a significant divide in trust in higher education and access and attendance for our rural students versus our urban and suburban students across the state. And we're seeing this in our college going rate. Our college going rate, again, that's defined as anybody seeking a short-term certificate or onward. Right after high school's declined in recent years, and we're down to 61% of our recent high school graduates from 65% in 2015. And we know that's due to the changing views on higher education, skepticism on its value, even despite all the statistics showing that better income, more like when we saw at the beginning of the pandemic, the huge spikes in unemployment, those who were most impacted were those with less credentials or less degrees. Just some Vigo County statistics. If you've looked at the Commission's reports, we actually break down data down to the high school level. So if you want to look at your high school, you can go to our website and look at our reports on various topics such as college going and college completion. Vigo County, as you can imagine, with 4 institutions right there, has a fairly high college going rate at 67%, or 67% higher than the state average. But just like the state, it is going down compared to 71% in years past. Some interesting statistics from the local high school. 91% of students graduating with a core 40s with either technical or academic honors are attending post-secondary education with less than half of the core 40 or less. 80% of those who earn that core 40 with honors graduate from post-secondary education within 6 years. But one area of concern in Vigo County would be the number of students needing remediation. That's more than double the state average at 17%, likely influenced by the higher college going rate, but it's something to take note of. And like I said, all this information is on the Commission's website, and I can share the information how to access that. As I mentioned, there is the skepticism around higher education, but what we've seen is that Hoosiers with a bachelor's degree or associate's degree or some college earn more than, on average, than their counterparts with a high school diploma. It's not to demean a high school diploma in any way, shape, or form. It's just the statistics behind the income. And then we know that every class. Yes.
A minute, but your PowerPoint, we can see your screen, but it's not advancing. Like it's not showing us the slides as you move through them.
Oh, it's not showing any of it?
We're still on like your basic, it's not in presentation mode, so we're still on the initial. There you go. That's better.
Yeah, we'll just do it like it. We'll just do it like this.
Okay, that helps.
All right. So each group of public graduates adds about $13 billion to the economy over their lifetime. The Commission's work is guided by our recent strategic plan released earlier this year. It's called Reaching Higher in a State of Change, focused on 3 areas. College completion, we're working on making sure more students who access college graduate college. Accessing post-secondary education isn't the end game. The end game is actually completing, focusing on closing equity gaps, and making sure that we have a strong talent pipeline. We are evaluating each year our key metrics to make sure that we are increasing educational attainment, that we are working to make sure that our programs have career relevant aspects within them, whether that be internships, cooperative education, other items like that. And we're judging the economic impact. We know that this is going to be a long curve to bend in terms of household income, but you can see where Indiana ranks across the Midwest, and we want to raise that median household income, and we can do that by increasing our educational attainment. And we know that we need to find the right fit for all of our students who access post-secondary education. And we need to adapt more than ever. We know that with the COVID-19 pandemic that we're going to see accelerations in items like automation. We need to make sure our citizens are ready to take these jobs of the future and adjust to this new economy that we're going to see emerging here in the coming months. We need to make sure our employers and educators like today are working together and having open lines of communication, and that there needs to be a pathway for all students. Just some quick items on the COVID-19 pandemic. As I'm sure you're all aware, budgets have been impacted, but the state budget has as well. We know that we had to dip into the reserves. Our state agencies, such as the commission, took a 15% cut on our budget. We were able to protect our state financial aid, but there's no guarantees going into the budget session. Our institutions, our public institutions, took a 7% cut on their appropriations for operating dollars. Now, there was CARES funding for the institutions, but we've seen all of them take significant hits to their budgets in terms of the budget cut, cost to address the COVID-19 pandemic, enrollments, room and board refunds, loss of auxiliary revenue. Higher education is facing a difficult time in terms of budget cuts. And on December 16th, we'll see the revenue forecast, and we'll have a better idea of what the state budget will look like after December 16th of this year. Some quick items on enrollment. We are down across the board, unlike previous recessions, with our two-year sector facing the biggest decreases in terms of enrollments, likely to due to access to childcare. Mentioned earlier, my kids are at home today, starting today for virtual education. So we know that that's impacting individuals' ability to access college. To help address these cuts, we've used some funding from the CARES Act for the Rapid Recovery Program, which scales our Workforce Ready Grant and other short-term certificate programs to allow individuals to have earned certificates or credentials in open positions right now. We've expanded the Employer Training Grant. If you've not heard of the Employer Training Grant, I would encourage you to check out the Next Level Jobs website. This helps employers train their employees, and they can receive up to $10,000 per trained employee and up to $100,000 for the grant. And then we've added 50 new certificate programs to this program as well. This is the website that we've been referring individuals to access, to be able to access this opportunity, to connect them with that. We've recently launched a partnership with Ivy Tech, taking Hoosiers to the next level, and we've seen significant enrollments in the second 8-week courses at Ivy Tech. We're talking thousands of new students enrolling for these second 8-week courses. And just to close out, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about our state financial aid programs here in the state of Indiana. We are 4th in the nation and 1st in the Midwest in need-based financial aid, led by the 21st Century Scholarship, which is in its 30th anniversary this year, which has helped more than 40,000 Hoosiers obtain a college degree. And we know that 100,000 students are enrolled between 7th and 12th grade. 21st Century Scholars are the only population within our college completion report that are on pace to close the achievement gap. And they have a higher college going rate and a higher college graduation rate than their other low-income peers. We've focused on, as I mentioned earlier, the more non-traditional populations. In 2016, we launched the You Can Go Back program, which helped Hoosiers who had stopped out of post-secondary education finish what they started. We've had over 2,000 students graduate or earn a credential through that program, and 1,000 more are still enrolled working towards that. And as I mentioned earlier, we've launched the Workforce Ready Grant, where individuals can earn workforce credentials and certificates free of charge to them, so tuition and fee free at our 2-year institutions here in Indiana. And then finally, we know that state financial aid here is a solid investment, that we know with 75% of our recipients, more than 75% staying in state. We say more than 75% because we can't track all of our individuals. We have to use unemployment insurance records, and those do not catch certain self-employed, federal employees, items like that. And we know that each graduating class of state financial aid recipients contributes about $3.5 billion to the economy. So kind of gave a lot of information there fairly quickly. I just didn't want to take too long, as I know that the presidents behind me are going to have a lot of great information for you, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and I apologize for the glitch there at the beginning.
No problem. Josh, would it be okay if we made your PowerPoint available maybe as a separate item for people who were on the call today. Would that be all right?
Yeah, I'll send you a PDF. Prior to everybody joining on, I found a typo, so I don't want to send the one I sent out to you earlier, but I'll go ahead and share the update.
Well, thank you. And I would point out real quick, in case you were unaware, Josh, we did, as a region, receive our 21st Century Talent Region designation earlier this year. So in the midst of COVID, so that's something we're pretty proud of, and it's really caused us to have a lot of good conversations around aligning our education and our workforce efforts. So just wanted to point that out.
That's great.
Well, thank you very much. I am now pleased to introduce our panelists this morning. We are joined by Rob Kuntz, who's the president of Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology, Dr. Deborah Curtis, the president of Indiana State University, Leanne Crooks, chancellor of Ivy Tech State College, the Terre Haute campus, and Dr. Dottie King from St. Mary of the Woods College. Thank you all for being here with us this morning and sharing wonderful information with us. We're looking forward to it.
So we'll get started with a few basic questions just to kind of help set a baseline. Let's do just a quick kind of situation report. Where are each of your institutions at today, especially in terms of dealing with COVID, in terms of online learning, in-person learning, what's happening there at your institution, and what do you think is going to be happening in the next less than 30 days as we get close to that Thanksgiving mark. So we'll go in alphabetical order, which when I was alphabetizing you all last night, I didn't realize how many C's we had. So we'll start with Rob Kuntz. Rob? Oh, we can't hear you, Rob.
There we go.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all.
There we go.
Or see your black boxes, see some of you. That's not like what we spend most of our day doing these days. Where to start? So from Rose-Hulman's perspective, I think I've got several points to make about COVID, but I'll start with just an overview of enrollment. So our freshman class this fall was 547, which for us was up about 10%, which is a little unusual. We made a strategic change in our enrollment practices this past year, actually past 2 years, and it's begun to pay real dividends. So we're really, really happy with that, and especially in light of COVID. Our total enrollment right now on campus is right at 1,960 students, around a little over 2,000 when you add in some graduate students and part-timers, that kind of thing, but it's right around 2,000. And we're experiencing, as far as from a recruitment perspective this year, some success early on in terms of virtual recruitment. We, as everyone else, we toggled to virtual pretty quickly. We were really concerned about that from the perspective of really what Rose-Hulman sells and what we based our reputation on is in-person experience, individualized attention and support as part of our mission statement, as is many small colleges. And it really has been challenging from that perspective to really toggle everything to a virtual experience. But we've had some success on the recruitment front, and actually our domestic interest this year is growing. Our international interest, of course, is waning because of a variety of factors. And certainly before COVID, Rose-Hulman's international enrollment was about 80% Chinese students. And so that has virtually dried up, no pun intended, except for just a few online students at this point. And so that has been challenging for us. But overall, we've been weathering the enrollment storm, at least so far, pretty well. Being focused on STEM education, that's been really helpful to us. And that combined with some strategic changes in the way that we are working through enrollment marketing has been helpful. From a COVID perspective, I checked our stats this morning. We made a decision early on with the advice of 200 of my favorite engineering colleagues on campus. We made the advice to test 100% of our population. So we're testing 100% of the population weekly. And it's a pretty expensive undertaking, but it also has allowed us to keep our positivity rate on campus under 0.5% until this past week. Now, with the past week spike locally, we have experienced some of that as well, and we are right at 1% now from a positivity perspective. But we've been very aggressive in that regard. So with the start of the quarter, we are testing 100% of our population. We have allocated fairly significant quarantine and isolation space adjacent to campus, and really have focused our efforts on trying to manage that aggressively. And so far, that's served us well. We're on 3 10-week quarters. And so the first quarter ends next week with finals as of Thursday. And there's a 1-week break at Thanksgiving. And normally we would come back in December. This year we're going online for 3 weeks in December, and then the Christmas holiday, and then students will hopefully return on January 6th this year, which is a different date for us, to finish winter quarter in person. So they will be in person starting in January through the end of February, then a 1-week break, and then spring quarter. So our schedules have been adjusted. We've adjusted the spring break schedule, all the things you've seen a number of schools do. We've done that as well. So we are experimenting with different types of testing from a COVID perspective. So we currently are using PCR testing, which is, as you know, fairly expensive. We moved to a pooled testing model a few weeks ago, which basically pools samples into 4 or 5 individual samples into one pool for testing. Then if there's a positive result, then those 4 or 5 individuals have to be retested. But it's still less expensive, dramatically less expensive than what we were doing. And that's also worked well for us to this point. We're excited about the announcement from Dr. Box a few days ago with regard to the availability of the card testing, the Abbott card testing. And we will be moving to that in January, albeit we'll continue to be testing weekly. So we'll have some mix of the state supply and some of our own private supply to do that. But it is a much less expensive test. The challenge with it will be that it does have a higher percentage of false positives than what our current method is using. And so we have some alternative structures we're building in place to try to manage that. So we spent a lot of time and money trying to be aggressive on the testing side. We think it's served us well to this point, but it's been really challenging. The positive note there, our students, by and large, have really rallied around this, being tech students to begin with, but they've taken it really seriously, and that's been really helpful. So we really have not had compliance issues around masking and social distancing. Our student affairs staff and those folks have been really creative in finding ways to continue to have some type of activity, albeit socially distanced and safe for them to participate in. Just one last comment about the migration this year. We really migrated to a virtual format, but on a blended basis. So roughly 35, I'll just say in rough terms, a third of our courses are offered still completely face-to-face. So students are in class, socially distanced and masked with all the appropriate precautions. Another third to probably around 40% now are what we would call blended, which are a mix of courses that are in person 2 days a week and online 2 days a week. So trying to minimize the exposure and risk. And then a third of those, roughly a third of those truly are completely online courses. And that serves our international students well. Also, obviously, our students in quarantine and isolation, those students, all students have a bag packed, and if they're diagnosed as positive, whether they're asymptomatic or symptomatic, they're immediately moved to quarantine space and they continue their coursework. And so it really has been a burden on the faculty to try to toggle students back and forth between online and in person. It really, really has been a challenge, but the campus has rallied well. So I'll pause and does that cover your topics, Kristen?
It does. You've got them all.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.
We'll go next to Leanne Crooks from Ivy Tech.
Good morning. So at Ivy Tech, some of the similar things that you will hear from the four-year partners, but obviously our situation is a little bit different in the fact that we do not have the residential component. So there are benefits of that, and then there are challenges of that as well. Our enrollment, as Josh presented in the CHE presentation, two-year partners across the state, typically during a recession, community colleges see an increase in enrollment. That is not happening with this particular recession, at least yet. We did see a decline for fall enrollment, and are tracking. Our enrollment processes are a little bit different. We will see very different students in the spring, so we continue to enroll for spring. But we are currently in the fall sitting at about 3,300 students, which is down a little bit. What we're really seeing from our students is the, as Josh mentioned, the issues that they face outside of the classroom. They were a little bit frozen in the beginning as to whether they could or should enroll. They didn't know if if they were a non-traditional student, if their kids were going to be at home. Their work environment is different. And then our traditional students, we're still seeing a significant number of them, but we also are seeing that they were very concerned about the experience that they were going to have. Many of our traditional students will be in our health programs and our School of Technology programs, which are really focused on hands-on components. For us, we are maintaining about a 50% census on campus, and our focus is on those lab-based courses. So if it is a hands-on course that has any lab-based component, those are face-to-face. And obviously, as Rob indicated, we spent a lot of time figuring out how to social distance and how to position those courses appropriately. So what we also have done some of the blending to where the actual lecture component would be virtual at the same time then they're in for labs. But what we've also experienced is much of what our K-12 partners experience. Our students, when they go home, internet access and availability is a challenge. So we've actually brought some of that instruction. If they are here for a lab, we've also brought some of the instruction back on campus as well. And so our virtual classes are those that do not have a hands-on component. Right now, we are very focused on all of our plan Bs in case something were to happen and we had to go remote based on the metrics that are outside of our campus. So we are very focused right now on trying to get all of the hands-on components, all of the labs. I just was talking to a faculty person who's here trying to get labs done that they would have normally done at the beginning or the end of the semester, trying to get those done at the beginning now so that we can, or midway in the semester, to make sure that when if we were to be remote, that it's back just to the lecture components. So we're just trying to be very nimble in that process, knowing that the numbers are increasing around us. We've been very fortunate on campus as far as our positive scenarios. Many of our students are tested. We're not doing any testing ourselves because of our students being very mobile and many of them being virtual. But our students who are in our health programs are tested regularly to go into their clinical sites. So that's where we're seeing some of the positives that are popping up. And so we're managing through that process. But it's been very, very smooth as far as best can be expected during this time. We just know, as we sit on the calls with the Department of Health and know things that are happening out in our community, and knowing our students are out in that community, they're not kind of on the campus per se, that we have a risk that we're going to have to be ready to be nimble to manage through. Josh did mention that the additional funding through the CARES Act for the Taking Hoosiers to the Next Level. That was CARES funding that came through to the Department of Workforce Development. That was specifically focused on those employees or those Hoosiers who are unemployed across the state. That in very quick time, in a 2-week turnaround, communication went out to anyone who had been unemployed during that time, and they were allowed to come to Ivy Tech for a credential, as he indicated. The thing that was different about taking Hoosiers to the next level, we took several barriers out that normally would be barriers for students coming back in that situation. So if they owed a bill from before, if they'd had a bad experience from before, there were many of those barriers that were taken off the table. That is allowing us to serve Hoosiers in a way that we might not have been able to in the past. And so as Josh said, there were thousands across the state. Many of those that are coming through us are in the IT, School of Technology, and the health area. So we're excited to serve them, to get them a certificate and get them back into the workforce. So I want to allow time for my partners. So I think I will quit there, Kristen, unless I missed something.
Nope, I think you've covered it well. Thank you, Leanne.
Okay.
Next, we'll go to Dr. Curtis from Indiana State.
Well, good morning, everyone. Apologize, I'm a little distracted here as this situation requires, we are actually in the midst of some responses here that we'll be pushing out this morning. The governor's comments this week are a bit startling to many of us, but not surprising. We know the environment we're living in right now, and we've been in it for a while. I'm going to raise a hand and tell you, I was one of those in March who said, July will be through all of this. And now I've pulled myself back quite a bit in saying none of us can imagine when all of this will be resolved. Pretty delighted to share that very quickly in March, this campus shifted to online learning. We are trying to limp forward to spring break, but we just had to simply flip that switch the week before spring break. But everyone stepped up really well and transition to a tremendous focus on allowing our students and supporting our students to complete their spring semester successfully. And I was delighted to say that happened. Of course, it was a recruitment season like no other. And I imagine my colleague leaders here will say, and we hope never to see again. There's no rule book, there's no guidebook, there's nothing to look at to say, here's what other people did at a time like this. It's an opportunity, though. We keep talking about the opportunities. We'll write those guidebooks now for whenever some kind of amazing situation takes place across the country. So we saw about a 57% increase in students deferring their admission to Indiana State to a future semester, either spring coming up in January or next fall. It wasn't unexpected, but it's challenging because we all know as students sometimes make those decisions either for a gap year or a deferral. Life starts to happen and sometimes they don't get back at it. So we're working really hard to stay in touch with those students who had originally made a decision to go to school and then decided not to. We also saw an interesting phenomenon when we started in August of within a week to 10 days, some students who came, moved in and just said, I can't do this, and turned around and went home. So we had an interesting melt at the beginning of the fall that we don't usually have to that degree. But we've, of course, as many places have, ramped up our student counseling and our telemedicine and opportunities for students to be served. And we've increased the staffing in our counseling center to help students navigate this time. And not at all unexpected, our employees as well. We have those benefits available, but the demand for those services have increased throughout this period. And we're not unlike any other area of the economy where it's just been an incredibly stressful time. Our partnership with the Vigo County School Corp has been really crucial as well, because you might imagine with 2,000 employees here, when the schools make decisions about children and their study, it dramatically impacts the ability of the parents who work for our institution and many of the other entities in this community to be able to do what they believe they need to do to support their children, as well as maintain their commitment to their jobs. So I am delighted at this point to say people have stepped up. In regard to the COVID piece, we started the fall with 10,830 students. Add to that the 2,000 employees on this campus. So we're really talking around 13,000 people that we've been monitoring. You know, Indiana State University works on a very narrow financial margin on purpose. We try to keep our tuition and fees as low as possible for our students because of the population we serve. And therefore, we don't have deep pockets to test everyone. We ran the numbers, and to test one time everybody was going to be about $1.5 million per test. We just simply don't have the resources to be able to do that. So we engaged in a very aggressive campaign, and we have a daily health assessment that everyone is required to engage in. Once you complete that assessment, if you're clear to either participate in class or work, you get a green check on your computer, and you have to show that green check to be admitted all over campus for any endeavor, be it class or rec center or whatever it might be. So that's allowed us to monitor how we're doing, but we've also run a daily weekday daily dashboard for COVID-19 results. And my spreadsheet is now getting pretty wide as I print it off daily to take a look at those trends for us. And we had worked with our PhDs in Health and Human Services at the start of the semester to say what percentage of our population should we start worrying about when we reach a certain percentage of either positive or quarantined or both. And we had determined around 10% was where we'd say, okay, it's time to make some other decisions. Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm one of the most surprised, because as August began, the provost and I started saying back and forth, if we can just get to October 1st, we'll be really delighted and not have to flip a switch back to all online. And October 1st came and went, November 1st came and went. Here's what our dashboard has pretty much looked like. We started the semester at the highest point. We were at about a 3.4% of everyone either isolating or quarantining. Then it started to go down. We actually, by mid-semester, were at high points around 1.75 to 2%. And then in the last 2 weeks, much like Vigo County in the area, we've started to climb back up again. I'm a firm believer in you never wish your life away, but I was kind of wishing this was the week before Thanksgiving and not next week, because those numbers are going up much in the way that the state and Vigo County numbers are going up. So we had already planned as we started the semester after Thanksgiving to not send students away for that week and then bring them back. So we had already planned, we have 2 weeks after Thanksgiving break. 1 week is study week, the next week is exam week, to already move that to online when the semester started. So that's what our plan is, and we are moving forward with it. We may make a few modifications next week, which is what I'm fiddling with here with team and staff and moving forward, given the governor's comments, to do things a little bit differently. But then we began the middle of fall thinking about what will happen for spring semester. And similar to Rob's comments, we are about one third this fall. 1/3 totally online, although we're usually about a quarter of that anyway. 1/3 what we call hybrid, which is a combination, given the faculty members' decisions about pedagogy, how to do that, some in class, some outside of class, or flipped classroom type of activities. And then 1/3 totally face-to-face. As you might imagine, we don't have a tremendous number of really large classes, but for those that we do, we have found even larger spaces, broken them into smaller units to be able to social distance and clean properly. And that's gone incredibly well. As you might imagine, that kind of a scenario isn't not only on faculty and students, but it's on our facilities, staff, and all of our building service workers to make sure that we can continue in a safe way. And so far, I'm still knocking on some wood here, it's gone pretty well. This week, we have tipped up to about 3.75%, either in isolation or quarantining for our students. The majority of those isolating or quarantine are off campus. We do have on-campus quarantine space that we identified and put aside at the start of the fall. We've never maxed that out. I don't know where I'd suggest we be with that if we didn't already have plans to be online after Thanksgiving, but it's worked well for us this semester. So we're grateful for that. Also very grateful for our colleagues at Union Hospital and Regional Medical Center who have been so supportive. When we started the semester, contact tracing was a huge concern. So we now have employed between 8, depending on the day, 8 and 10 contact tracer, 8 to 10, tracing our students and our employees when initial need to do that takes place. That staff meets daily with the Vigo County Health Department. I can't say enough about Sycamore alum, Dr. Brucken, who has remained in close contact with me and with our team in order for us to do the things we need to do to be good citizens in Vigo County and Terre Haute, and as well care for the safety of our colleagues. I don't know about you, but I've watched in my environment, even my own personal family, as the fall moved on, we started to get a little comfortable, maybe not as often washing hands or as often pulling out that sanitizer. And we've all turned around on that now. Masks have been really good on our campus. Everyone's done a really good job of wearing their masks. So we're very grateful for that. If anyone comes up with a project on what to do with all the extra plexiglass when all this is over, please let me know. It could be a new furniture idea. I don't know, but we have plexiglass everywhere. And that served us very well. We also have taken a look at how do we manage hotspots on our campus. So the data gathering has been crucial for us with the kind of numbers we're talking about, and being able to determine, is there a particular floor in a dormitory? Is there a particular department in an academic building? So, and we've been able to monitor that and watch that very closely. And I'm grateful to say we haven't had big launches of very specific hotspots, but the COVID environment combined with the social injustice challenges of the summer that brought us to the fall, combined with the budget challenges, have just created this perfect storm that one just has to look for the opportunity in all of it. And I know we're going to have more opportunity to say something about that coming up here. But we are every day grateful and joyful that we get to come to this campus and do the work that we do to fulfill our mission and have been able to maintain as we have so far. So with that, I will turn over to Dr. King.
Well, thank you, Dr. Curtis. And before I start, I'd just like to say how grateful I am to my colleagues and peers, the other leaders of institutions of higher ed in our community. We're friends with one another, and it just reminds me when we all come together and discuss our various schools, how blessed Vigo County is to have the array and diversity of types and missions of schools in Vigo County. So I'm not sure where we've had it for so long. I'm not sure we're always thinking of how great, wonderful it is, but I think it's wonderful. So same area of the Woods College, a lot of what you'll hear will echo what you've heard from my colleagues, and then there'll be nuances because of our differences. It's one of the few times in history that I've been really thankful to be small, because I think being small has served us really well. So I'll tell you, we moved to remote learning on March 18th, and because we've had a distance education program since the 1970s, and more than 20 of our majors exist in an online format, that transition was probably easier for us than it was for some schools. It's not to say it wasn't without challenges, however, because we do have programs like equestrian studies and music therapy that, as you might imagine, don't translate well to an online environment. However, that's where we saw the creativity of our faculty really shine. They really learned the technical parts of delivering online from their peers and then adapted it readily to their content. So I wish you could have, I could show you a video of people, what they did with a horse and a horn and a drawing class, because it was quite creative. So because of all of their expertise and creativity, we did not have to move to a pass-fail option, which most schools did across the country, had to go to pass-fail. So our students finished with regular grades, and we saw no decrease in retention or the success rate of the students. So that was all good news. The summer had us busy doing two things, planning for the fall, like my colleagues, but we, being a small school and having this was our 180th year, we're just steeped in traditions, so we didn't let go of all of those easily. So we were planning for how in the world are we going to have a face-to-face commencement and ring day. Ring day is a big day at St. Mary of the Woods College. So with a lot of thought and planning on our part, involvement of our students, and oversight from the health department, we successfully had a face-to-face commencement, which was really an all-day long commencement. Wore me out, but we did that. And then right as school began, we had our ring day, had it outside for the first time ever, that the students were able to actually receive their rings from me, which seems to mean something to them. So the fall for us was all about planning how to be face-to-face fully and be as safe as possible. So like my colleagues, we looked at every classroom space, made sure they were big enough, and had to do a lot of adjusting, physical distance of the desks, and no back-to-back class in the same space so that it was cleaned in between, a mask mandate. And then what we said to our students, we did not test, only symptomatically. What we said to our students is your behavior outside of class is going to be really important to our success. We're going to count on you. And it's not just protecting yourself, because we know you might not be very good at that. So we want you to protect our face-to-face experience, and we want you to protect our entire campus. Because of that, I really believe our students saw it differently, took that responsibility seriously, and we've seen remarkably low numbers. Our highest positivity in any 1 week has been 0.5%. And we've quarantined people. We've had entire athletic teams quarantined with 1 positive student, as you might imagine. But what we've not had is any outbreaks from that. In other words, when the entire team quarantined, the entire team was not positive. Or if we had a positive student, we had no positivity in the classrooms that they were part of. So I think that means that we put good protocols in place. So I'm really pleased with how our community has responded. The faculty have been true champions. We made outdoor classrooms wherever we could, or outdoor places. And of course, the weather was good through October. So we had lots of times, if you would have been strolling about our campus, you would have seen people conducting outdoor experiences. They felt safe that way. And so we accommodated that as well. We always planned for next Friday, the 20th, to be our last on-campus day, and so it will. And like Deborah, right after Thanksgiving, we'll have a week of study week and then a week of finals, and they will be remote. Our students return on July 11th, and it is our plan right now. Of course, who knows where this plan will go, depending on what happened with the numbers and in our area, but our plan is to start on July 11th face-to-face and follow the protocols that we were successful with this fall. Our enrollment, like everyone, was impacted. We didn't bring in the number of students we thought we were going to bring in, and yet we did experience an enrollment increase. So our total student number for when we count in the fall was 1315, and for us, that's an uptick of 5%. So probably not a dramatic increase, but still an increase in the midst of a hard time. I really would like to give a lot of credit to 2 groups for that. When we all moved to shelter in place, our admissions team and our marketing arm really remained very engaged, and they started creatively thinking. They arranged a virtual tour that then we could find ways to have our visit days in a virtual way, and they just kept moving forward. So I really give them a lot of credit. So it's been a challenging semester, but I'm really thankful to the faculty and our employees who have risen to the challenge And then most thankful to our students who seem to have really monitored their out-of-class behavior. We always knew it wasn't going to be the classroom that was going to be a problem. It was going to be what they did when classes were over. So I'm really proud of them.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for the updates. Everything you said is things we hear echoed in the business community. I know it has a different lens in the higher education world, but I think a lot of our struggles are similar here. Kind of to that end, what we have today here is a lot of representation from the business community joining us on the call. So I'd like to ask each of you how the business community can best help support you through the short term, through the long term. I know there's still many challenges to come. One thing that comes to mind, the Chamber always has a nice role in helping facilitate internships and externships and those learning opportunities, which just seem to have been incredibly challenging this year, if even not possible at all. So, how can the business community help step up and help you as you try and navigate the upcoming challenges? We'll kind of go back through the same order. Rob? Oh, you got to, Rob, I don't think you're still muted.
You'd think by now I'd remember.
There we go.
I'd remember to do that. So from my perspective, I think, the local business community has been really supportive of Rose-Hulman for a very long time, and it really, really is appreciated. A number of our students do have internships and co-ops with local companies or local companies that have connection to larger companies, and that has been challenging. So with the pandemic, a lot of our internships that were scheduled this summer, of course, were canceled or moved to remote. And some of those internships did continue, but in a remote fashion. So we really are appreciative of that. Our entire career fair went remote as well. And while there were some benefits to that, there also are some challenges. So as you might remember, historically, Rose-Hulman's bragged about the fact that we have a placement rate around 98, 99% as of November 1st. This year it's 95%. And the primary reason for that is just companies are holding off on their hiring decisions and trying to wait out the pandemic, and which is totally understandable. But that's been challenging for us. But as far as the local community, I think the thing that can be most helpful from Rose-Hulman's perspective is just helping our local community understand how serious COVID actually is, and taking it seriously and following the guidance that the state and local officials are trying to manage as best they can. That's what's most helpful to us. We joke a little bit, but we're somewhat serious, and I think Dottie has some of the same experiences. We try to create a bubble for our students during COVID and try to keep them on campus, frankly, because we have better luck with that, but it's not a perfect model. And to the extent that the community around us is struggling with the virus, we've tried to do some things to be helpful to the community, but I think the local business community, the number one thing they can do for us is help the rest of our Terre Haute and Wabash Valley community understand how serious it is, and how with all of us participating in the recommended guidance of distancing and masking, no matter how tired we all are of that. That's what's really most helpful to us right now.
Thanks, Rob. While we have you unmuted, we did have a question come in through the chat for you about your kind of testing model, and what are some of the costs associated with that? You said there was quite a large cost savings going to the pod model versus the individual testing. I wonder if you had any information you'd be willing to share there.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the vendor, and we've had a couple of relationships since we started this testing actually in May. But those individual tests originally started out around $100 a piece. So if you do the math pretty quickly, with over 2,000 on campus every week, we're going to spend somewhere north of $2.5 million on testing alone. And the CARES Act was very much appreciated, but for Rose-Hulman, as an example, we received $1.2 million from the CARES Act. 600,000 of that went directly to students for aid. and the other 600,000 could offset testing and PPE requirements and preparation for classes. So it's been a substantial hit. And as a tuition-driven institution for us, basically a little over 60% of our revenue comes from tuition. I think a lot of folks assume that it all comes from our endowment, and that's actually not the case at all. So it comes from tuition, room, and board. So when that's dramatically impacted, it has a dramatic immediate impact on operations. So for this year, as an example, our employees had no increases during this fiscal year, and we suspended the retirement contribution. So it has had a more dramatic impact on the institution, I think, than some realize. But the cost of testing, we just felt was a priority, primarily to get our entire community comfortable coming back to campus. Being a STEM-focused institution, as well, as you might imagine, there's lots of expertise on campus about testing and what we should be doing. So it was a challenging exercise.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification there. Leanne, back to the kind of the question about the business community and support.
So I will echo Rob. We really appreciate all that the community is doing or can do to just follow the guidelines to help us continue. But I would say in March, when all of this first happened, one of the first things that we saw go away were our clinical spaces, just trying for those healthcare programs for people to, there were so many unknowns, and so that quickly happened. I really appreciate our partners. Now that we're further down the road, our students are still able to have those clinical experiences. We have a good partnership, a strong partnership with the SIM Center that we're all partners of, and we take advantage of that. But I worry on the other side of this, of having a pipeline of healthcare workers, or I worried in March, if having a pipeline of healthcare workers when we couldn't get those clinical sites in. And so I know that is a huge challenge for our partners. They're trying to manage through, we're all trying to manage through. Having a student there on top of that is a lot to ask. And so we really appreciate what our clinical partners are doing and allowing our students to get those experiences so that on the other side of this, we still have a pipeline of healthcare workers. So the other thing, because a large portion of our student body is non-traditional students, many of our students are in your workplaces. I would just encourage them to continue. This isn't a time to stop out, because on the other side of this, you're going to want them to have the skills. So continue to support them and encourage them to not take a break during this time and to continue their education.
Thank you. Dr. Curtis?
I as well will join the others in saying thank you for the support we've had already. And we are all right now, and it's back to that opportunity discussion, talking about what will post-secondary education be like coming out of the other side of this. There will never again be a higher ed environment like the fall of 19. We all have realized, even when the pandemic activity is past us, we know different things now. And I'll state for mine, first and foremost, we've had pockets of faculty, every place I've been have had them. I'm never going to teach online, never. Well, guess what? They did, and they did it really well. And we are grateful for that opportunity to say, okay, so now what does this look like for Indiana State? It's in our name, Indiana State. How do we serve some of those 100,000 Hoosiers with some college and no degree? Well, we have a better understanding now about how we can do that effectively and move forward. So for our business partners, I would say to you, continue to engage, as many of you already do. I'm looking at John because he does this on our advisory boards with our colleges. Help our professionals connect to your real world workplace. I often say with my role at the Indiana Chamber, I cannot replicate your work floor on my campus. We can create all kinds of simulation activities, but your workplace is the very best place of all for our students to marry the theoretical training they're getting here with the actual experiential training there. So continue to give that feedback as members of advisory boards. And I'm going to point towards something that we're not saying a lot about yet, but we will be, and grateful to Leanne for her collaboration with Ivy Tech and us, is our Lilly Grant opportunity that's coming forward here, where we're really looking at ways to retain students here on campus year round. And some of that is going to mean having places for some of them to go during the summer months to work and be engaged in actual work activities related to what they're preparing to do, to really ramp up that connection of what they're learning on the campus with what they learn out in the work environment. So big thanks to our colleagues, but also as well, looking forward, inviting you in and continuing those relationships that only make our end product, our graduates, better.
Thank you. Dr. King?
Well, going last is always hard because I just echo what all my brilliant colleagues have said, and our students need the same things and we feel the same gratitude. I will add to, what I'll add is to not duplicate what's already been said. I think higher ed, like the rest of the world, is forever changed by COVID, and our students are more ready to adapt than we are. They're more tech savvy. And so what I would like for you to feel free to do at St. Mary of the Woods and in our institutions is to reach out to our resources that we have to help you. Of course, all of our primary mission is to deliver a first-rate education to our students, but a secondary purpose is to serve the common good and the communities in which we reside. And so I really believe that we can be a resource to your businesses, and we have students that would benefit so much to be able to come in and share the things that they're so good at with you and your business in order to help it move forward into the new reality that will be post-COVID. So please feel free to find ways to reach out to us and let us be a resource to you.
Thank you all. It is a little bit after 9 o'clock, so to keep everybody on schedule, I know it's a busy morning for everyone and there's a lot of decisions to be made. I would like to remind everybody something that everybody who spoke today mentioned. It's really the biggest part we can do on the community side of things is, put those precautions in place. Wear our masks first and foremost. It's an easy, simple step that can really help our community. It can help all of these higher education institutions. It can help everybody as we try and get through this pandemic. So just a reminder, wear your mask. But again, thanks to all of you for participating today and taking the opportunity to share what's happening at your individual institutions with all of us here in the community and the business community especially. We will, like I said at the top of this, we will be posting today's program on the Chamber's YouTube channel following. So if you know of anyone who was not able to participate live but still wants to hear the conversation, they're welcome to go there and do that. I also would again like to thank our sponsor, Indiana American Water, for stepping up and helping provide some support for today's programming. And again, big thanks to all of our participants. I really appreciate everything you're doing and everything that you're doing for the community especially. So thank you all. Go off and enjoy the rest of your day.